Okay. Have you ever been there, like mid-workout, staring at the bar for some, complex lift, and just wondering, am I even loading this right? Is this the best weight for what I'm trying to do? Whether you're chasing strength or power or just moving better, that hunt for the optimal load, it's always there, isn't it? Well, today we're diving deep into some fascinating research that gets right into that. How do we pick the right weight, especially for those really dynamic moves? We're going to unpack two really common methods for deciding the load and see what the actual science says works best.
Yeah, this is some really insightful stuff we're digging into. The source material for this deep dive, it's a study called Differences in Mechanical Output Between One Repetition Maximum and Body Mass-Based Load Determination in the Behind Neck Push Jerk.
Hmm.
This work is done by Yi-Chien Chiang, and Timothy J. Suchomel. And it's published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. It's pretty recent, 2025, volume 24, pages 626 to 633.
Right. So our mission here for you listening is to really clarify the main differences between these two ways of setting weights. You've got the traditional one repetition maximum, the 1RM, and then this other approach using a percentage of your body mass, or BM. We want to explore when each might be the better choice, especially for an exercise like the behind neck push jerk. We'll look at kinetics, so force and power, and kinematics, that's movement velocity, and really explain what it all means for how you train. Okay, let's set the scene a bit. Why are things like weightlifting exercises and their WLDs, they're often called, why are they so popular in sports training?
Well, it really comes down to how well they mimic athletic actions.
Mm.
Think about jumping, sprinting, throwing. They all involve that rapid, powerful extension of the hips, knees, and ankles, what we call triple extension.
Sure.
And WLDs are just fantastic tools for teaching the body to produce a huge amount of force and power very quickly in those exact patterns.
Makes sense?
And if we focus specifically on the behind neck push jerk, the BMPJ, the really interesting overhead press variation, the bar starts on your traps, behind the neck. And what's thought to be special about the BMPJ is that it might actually boost concentric power output. The idea is it reduces sideways wobble or constraints on the bar path going up.
So a more direct upward drive.
Exactly, leading to potentially more efficient force application. It's designed for power.
Which brings us right back to why choosing the load is so critical, isn't it? It's not just picking up something heavy. The specific weight you lift creates a very specific mechanical stimulus, and that stimulus is what drives the adaptation, whether it's getting stronger, faster, or whatever your goal is. So understanding how to set loads is pretty fundamental stuff.
Absolutely. And traditionally, let's say the gold standard for setting loads, especially in weightlifting type movements, has been using a percentage of someone's one repetition maximum, their 1RM. So you test to find the absolute heaviest weight they can lift for one single perfect rep. It gives you a really precise measure of their maximal strength for that lift.
Okay, sounds precise, but is it always practical? That's the question.
That's the big question. It's accurate, yes, but is it always the best tool for the job in every situation, for every person?
Yeah, I can see the challenges, like trying to test 1RM for a whole team of athletes or someone who's brand new to lifting. It takes a lot of time, and honestly, it requires a decent amount of technique and confidence to push to a true max safely.
Exactly. It can be a real hurdle in many sort of day-to-day training environments. And that's where this alternative idea comes in, using a percentage of body mass, the BM percentage method. It's been suggested because, well, it seems simpler. No need for a maximal test. Just weigh yourself and do a quick calculation.
Okay, yeah, sounds convenient on the surface, but I bet there are critiques of that too.
Oh, definitely. The main knock against the BM percentage method is that it doesn't really account for individual differences. Things like relative strength, how strong you are for your size, or just your technical skill level.
Right, so a lighter person who's super strong might find a BM percentage load way too easy.
Precisely. And a heavier person who's maybe less technically sound, could find the same percentage way too hard, maybe even unsafe. But you could argue that for certain groups, like real beginners who maybe aren't ready for 1RM testing often, it might be a practical starting point, a way to get them lifting with some structure.
Interesting trade-off there.
And this leads us right into the gap this study looked at. We kind of knew body mass relates somewhat to 1RM in lifts like the snatch and clean, but it wasn't clear how using 1RM versus BM percentages to set the load actually affects performance in something like the behind neck push jerk, especially those mechanical outputs we talked about, force, power, velocity.
Gotcha. So that was the puzzle they wanted to piece together. How did they actually go about investigating it? What did the study look like?
Okay, so the setup was what's called a cross-sectional repeated measures design.
Meaning they tested the same people doing the same thing, but under different conditions?
Exactly. Allows for a direct comparison within the same individuals. And the participants are key here. They had 16 recreational male athletes, average age around 29, average weight about 81 kilos. Now, critically, they all had resistance training experience over 2 years on average. But, and this is important, they were considered novices specifically in the behind neck push jerk exercise itself.
Ah, okay. So experienced lifters generally, but new to this specific lift, that detail probably matters.
It really does. Their learning curve and how their strength related to their body mass could definitely play a role in the results.
Makes sense. So what did the actual testing involve?
It was pretty straightforward. First, they properly tested everyone's 1 RM on the behind neck push jerk, got that baseline number. Then, in another session, the participants did 3 reps of the BMPJ at different intensities, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, and 80%.
Okay, a range of typical training loads.
Right, and they did this twice. Once where the load was calculated based on their 1 RM, and once where it was calculated based on their body mass.
Got it. So they could compare apples to apples, just with different load calculation methods. How did they measure the outputs?
They used force plates. These are sensors in the floor that measure ground reaction forces very precisely. This let them collect kinetic data that's stuff like peak force, peak power, average power, impulse. Basically the oomph behind the lift.
Okay, the forces causing the movement.
And they also measured kinematic variables. That's about the motion itself. Peak velocity, average velocity, how long the upward push phase lasted. So how fast and smoothly the bar moved.
Kinetics for the cause, kinematics for the effect. Got it. All right, the setup sounds solid. Let's get to the good part. What did they actually find? What were the results?
This is where it gets really interesting. First off, they didn't find any significant interactions between the load method, 1 RM versus BM, and the intensity level.
Meaning the differences they saw between the methods were pretty consistent across all those percentages, from 40% up to 80%.
Exactly, which makes the findings quite robust. So let's break down the variables. First, kinematics, velocity, and time. Here, they found no significant differences between the 1 RM base loads and the BM base loads. Peak velocity, mean velocity, propulsive phase time, all pretty much the same.
Wait, really? So the speed the bar moved was similar regardless of whether the weight was based on their max lift or just their body weight?
That's what the data showed for these lifters, yeah. The effect sizes were trivial to small, suggesting very little practical difference in the movement speed or timing itself.
Huh. That's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think different absolute weights would move differently, but maybe not for these novice BNPJ lifters.
It seems that way. But hold that thought, because when we look at the kinetics, the force and power, the story changes dramatically.
Okay, I'm listening.
For the kinetic variables, peak force, peak power, mean power, and impulse, the 1 RM-based approach resulted in significantly higher values across all intensities compared to the BM-based approach.
Significantly higher, like noticeably different.
Yes. The effect sizes here were moderate to large. For example, peak force differences had a Hedges G ranging from 0.55 up to 1.14, depending on the intensity. Mean force was even higher, 0.86 to 1.24. These were meaningful differences in the actual force and power being generated.
Wow, okay. So let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Using the 1 RM percentage meant they were actually producing substantially more force and power with the bar, even if the bar speed looked similar.
That's the key finding. More force, more power, more impulse with the 1 RM method. It provided a greater kinetic stimulus.
That feels really significant for training outcomes.
Absolutely. And they also looked at that relationship between 1 RM and body mass we mentioned earlier. They found a moderate correlation. The R value was 0.54 and the R squared was 0.29.
Okay, so R squared of 0.29 means body mass only explained about 29% of the difference in their 1 RM strength on this lift.
Correct. So while body mass definitely plays a part, it's far from the whole story. Over 70% of why someone could lift, more or less, was down to other factors.
Like technique, relative strength, limb lengths maybe?
Could be all of those. Skill, neuromuscular efficiency, leverage. It highlights that just using body mass alone misses a lot of what determines actual lifting capability, at least in this group.
Okay, so putting all these pieces together, what's the main takeaway message from this study?
The big conclusion is pretty clear. For this group recreational guys new to the BMPJ, you really should not treat the 1 RM and the body mass percentage methods as interchangeable ways to set your weights.
Yeah.
Especially not if maximizing those kinetic outputs, the force and power, is your goal.
Right. So Translating that for someone listening, if your main aim is to build serious force and power, like for explosive sports or just getting stronger overhead,
Yeah.
then the 1RM-based approach seems like the way to go, right? Because it just produced more of that kinetic oomph.
That's exactly what this study suggests. It naturally leads to heavier absolute loads. Remember, the average 1 RM was 1.2 times body mass here, and those heavier loads demand greater force production. If you want the biggest kinetic stimulus, 1 RM is superior based on this data.
Okay. But what about the body mass method? Is it useless then?
Not necessarily useless, but you have to understand its limitations. It can be a practical tool, maybe for beginners or large groups, where 1 RM testing is tough. And as we saw, it might produce similar movement kinematics, similar bar speed in novices. So if the goal is just getting familiar with the movement pattern at a consistent speed, maybe it has a place. But coaches and athletes need to be really aware that by using it, they are likely sacrificing that kinetic stimulus. You're probably not maximizing force and power development compared to using 1 RM percentages. It's a clear trade-off. Convenience versus optimal kinetic output.
And that distinction really matters for you, the listener, right? Because we know training adaptations come from the specific stress you put on your body. So if you're aiming for maximum strength and power, you need that higher kinetic stimulus. Using a potentially less effective method, even if it's easier, might slow down your progress towards that specific goal. It's about matching the tool to the job.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about stimulus specificity. Now, we should also touch on the limitations here, to be fair.
Good point. No study is perfect.
Right. First, remember the participants. Recreational males, novice to the BNPJ. These findings might not hold true for elite weightlifters with years of practice and much higher relative strength. Their relationship between BM and 1 RM could be very different.
Okay, so context matters. What else?
This study looked at acute outputs, what happened in one session. It doesn't tell us definitively about long-term results, like who gains more strength or power over, say, 12 weeks of training. We need longer studies for that.
Makes sense. Acute effects don't always translate directly to chronic adaptations.
Exactly. There are also practical quirks with the BM method. Your weight fluctuates daily, right? Does that mean you should adjust your lift by tiny amounts? Barbell increments are usually 1 kilogram, maybe 0.5 kilograms if you're lucky. It's not that precise in practice.
Good point, yeah. The real-world application gets messy.
And finally, never forget that lifting is complex. It's not just about the load. Technique, coordination, how strong you are relative to your size, these things massively influence performance and how effective any loading strategy is for you specifically.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, this deep dive really shows that choosing between 1 RM percentages and body mass percentages for an exercise like the behind neck push jerk, it really hinges on your specific training goals.
Absolutely. If maximizing force and power is top priority, the evidence here points towards the 1 RM-based method being superior for driving those higher kinetic outputs. If convenience is paramount, maybe for beginners, and the focus is more on consistent movement speed, then the body mass approach could be a viable alternative. But you have to accept that you're likely leaving some kinetic potential on the table. It's about knowing that trade-off.
Yeah, it forces you, the listener, to ask, what am I really trying to achieve with this exercise in my program right now? Answering that honestly helps you pick the better tool for your needs. It's about being intentional with your training. Now, we've covered a lot, but this is just scratching the surface of the detail in the actual paper. For a much deeper understanding, we definitely recommend reading the full article. Again, it's Differences in Mechanical Output Between 1 Repetition Maximum and Body Mass-Based Load Determination in the Behind Neck Push Jerk, and you can find it in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. If you found this deep dive useful and you want more insights like this to help you cut through the noise and get well-informed quickly, definitely follow our channel and turn on those notifications. That way you won't miss our next deep dive into the latest research shaping how we think about training and performance. Until